Namaste, friends. Welcome to the next episode of the series on the Bhagavad Gita. And the verse that we are going to look at today is verse number 27 in chapter 2. As always, I'm going to first read the verse and briefly comment on it after that. So, this is how the verse goes Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmad apariharye arte natvam shochitum arhasi. And the literal translation of the verse is very simple. Everything that is born must die, and everything that dies must be born again. Why then mourn the inevitable? It is so simple, I'm going to repeat it again. Everything that is born must die, and everything that dies must be born again. Why then mourn the inevitable? Now, in this section of the Gita, we are still looking at Krishna's consolation to Arjuna. The first chapter was Arjuna's despondency, where he presented all the arguments as to why he should not be fighting this war, why this might not be the right thing to do. And then Krishna is responding to all the questions that Arjuna posed to him in the second chapter. That's where we are at. And Krishna, from the very beginning, picks it up from the highest thread. He starts by explaining the nature of the soul, our own divinity that resides within, the immutable soul that is neither born, does not die, and that does not slay, can nor be slain. We looked at verse 19 of chapter 2 in the last week. And this first section where Krishna is speaking is talking about the nature of that true essence of who we are. And by verse 26, Krishna says something interesting. He says, Arjuna, even if you do not believe what I'm saying, even if you don't believe that this soul is immutable, even if you do think this true essence of who you are is born and does die, even then you should not be mourning. Even then, this is not a reason to lament. And I find even that verse very fascinating because Krishna gives Arjuna the opportunity to disagree with him, which is a very fascinating idea because, again, I think the 7th or the 6th verse of chapter 2 that we looked at a few weeks ago, Arjuna simply says, I seek refuge unto thee, just guide me, tell me what is right. So Arjuna completely surrenders, and yet Krishna gives him the option constantly. It is up to you to take or not what I'm offering right now, and that is characteristic of a true guru. The true guru never imposes on the will of the disciple. He simply invites them to the highest reality. And whether or not Arjuna truly is aware of that nature of the soul is even secondary here, because I think Krishna is speaking to all of us. Essentially, what Krishna is saying is, even if you don't believe that the soul is immutable, this is still not a reason to lament. And I think of myself, and I'm speaking for most of you who are watching this, and perhaps everybody that I know when I say this, I do believe that the soul is immutable. I do believe in these teachings of self-realization of Sanatana Dharma, that there's a spark of divinity within us. And not only do I believe, I think I have deep faith out of experience in meditation that my own identity, my essence is not limited just to this body and mind. I do have faith in that. And yet, I wonder if I live in that realization because Bhishma is still alive in the battlefield, if you get that reference. Because I'm still deeply and strongly identified with this limited self. So I don't always live in that realization that I am this immutable soul, that I am beyond birth and death. It is part of my awareness, but not in the sense that it informs how I think and how I relate with this world. Interestingly, for those of you who've read the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda talks highly about this great woman saint who lived in India, Anandamayi Ma. And throughout her life, both in the lines that she speaks in the autobiography, but even in general, throughout her entire life, she never used the pronoun I to refer to the limited self. She often referred to this body that needs to be fed, this body that needs to do this body that needs to be taken somewhere. Now, I don't think of this or speak of myself as this body. Neither did Yogananda or Yukteswar Giri or Larry Mashai. Not that they did not live in that state of constant awareness of the true soul. Even though they lived there, I think they were relating to that body and personality for our sake so that we could relate to them through that body, through that instrument that was channeling these teachings for all of us. But for those of us who are not yet in that state of realization, in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, we are not yet there. We still have those limitations that we identify with. When I say I'm not talking about the immutable Brahman within me. I'm talking about, a 34-year-old man. I'm talking about this body. I'm talking about this personality that I've taken on. So I think what Krishna is about to say is very important for us, because we do want to know how to move through this world, even when we don't live in that constant awareness that we are not this limited self. And he presents this idea which sounds so simple. If everything that is born must die, and if everything that dies must be born again, why mourn the inevitable? Why resist change? That's really what he's presenting in this particular verse, verse 27 of chapter 2. This is very closely related and reminded me of another story in the Mahabharata, which I'm going to share with you. This is a story that happens when the Pandava brothers are in exile in the forest along with their mother Kunti. And all of them are living in very, very humble forest dwellings like a hermit. And the youngest brother Sahadeva goes to the nearby lake to fetch some water. And he does not come back. And the other brothers keep following him and go to that same lake. And 4 of them go and they do not return back. Finally, the eldest brother Yudhishthira, he goes to that lake to fetch water. And when he goes, he sees his other 4 brothers lying unconscious. And when he goes in to get water, he's stopped by this astral entity who is referred to as Yaksha. Yaksha simply means a disembodied spirit, this astral being who is guarding and controlling the lake. And this Yaksha tells Yudhishthira, you can take water from this lake and you can have the lives of your brothers back only if you can answer all of my questions to my complete satisfaction, and that way you can prove that you're worthy and you're wise enough to drink from this lake. That's what the Yaksha tells him. And this leads on, what ensues is this question and answer, sort of a debate between Yaksha and Yudhishthira. It's a very interesting part of the Mahabharata. The Yaksha asks many questions to test Yudhishthira to see if he truly is a man of wisdom. And Yudhishthira, of course, passes the test. The reason I brought up that story right now is one of those questions that Yaksha asks Yudhishthira is very interesting and relevant to our topic for today. The Yaksha asks Yudhishthira, the eldest of Pandava brothers, what do you find the most amusing or surprising in this world? And Yudhishthira says, the most amusing thing I find to be is this. Every being, every creature born on this world eventually meets the fate of old age and death. And yet, every person moves around and walks around this world as if that fate would not be his, that as if he would not meet that same end. Now, that is indeed a point worthy of amusement. But when I think about it, when I contemplate deeply about it, it is similar to what I was sharing a few minutes ago. I am a man of common sense, and I do believe that all of us, we are all going to, attain old age. We'll eventually one day leave this body. This body that is called Sai Ganesh now will no longer be that one day. It'll just be a bowl of ashes or rotting flesh and bones. That's all this will be. And as much as I am aware of that, as much as I know that to be the truth, am I living in that awareness? And that's really what Yudhishthira is answering to Yaksha, because it's a subtle point that Krishna is presenting that Yudhishthira mentions to Yaksha. What he's talking about is not that we don't know that we're all going to die. We all know that. Our minds know that. We are aware that knowledge is with us. But what he is referring to is the fact that we do not live in that awareness of impermanence of life. We still attach ourselves to all these things in this world that we clearly know to be impermanent. And that Yudhishthira finds amusing. And for most of us, I think I'm going to speak for myself, I find that disconcerting, quite far from amusing, because we find ourselves caught in that vortex so often where that impermanence of life is no longer part of our awareness. It is part of our common sense. It is something that we know. And yet, the trick of Maya, this delusion, this samsara that we are part of, makes us believe that somehow this thing that we are seeking is going to be permanent. This is going to give us lasting happiness. Death is the final verdict. And yet, we attach ourselves to things that we cannot take with us. Another common Indian epithet, or the way it is referred to in Indian culture, is when you leave the body, you don't take anything with you. You don't take as much as a needle point, you don't take as much as a thread. Nothing comes along with you, everything stays back. Nothing is yours. And this is a very subtle truth, and one we have to constantly remind ourselves of, because it is so easy to get lost in this world in that way. In fact, the greatest blessing and the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is presenting to Arjuna and to all of us, is this priceless gift, is this way, is this teaching, is all these tools that we need in order to bring these two realities that seem so far apart together. What are these two realities? On one end is our own awareness of the spiritual truths. The fact that the soul is permanent, is immutable. It is not affected by things of this world. It does not die, it is not born again. And yet, we have to relate to this world. We have to move through this world. We have to, just because the soul is immutable and everything in this world is impermanent, I cannot just sit at home. I have to move through life. I can meditate maybe for a couple of hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, then I'm going to be hungry. And once I've had some food, I'm going to be bored. There's all this energy, our own karma is acting from inside us. It's moving us. That is the reason why we took these bodies. That is the reason why we incarnated in this world to start with. And we have to express that karma. We have to move through this world and we have to do our best. And yet with this awareness that we are not this ego, we are not this limited self, we are this soul. And more importantly, everything in this world is impermanent. Change is the only constant. And Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, presents us the roadmap. It presents us all the things that we need in order to do that. That's what we are going to look at more and more as we study both chapter 2 and all the other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna how to bring both these realities together, how to hold on to that dispassion, how to detach yourself from the world and yet engage with it. How is it possible? How can we do that? That's really what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. And in essence, I have already answered my own question. The key to this problem lies with that word attachment. And again, Krishna is referring to that many times in chapter 2, and he's going to talk about it even more in the Bhagavad Gita. The way we attach to the world is really the root of all that delusion. The delusion does not come from engaging with the world. The delusion comes from attaching with it and accepting change. That is the teaching that we have in this particular verse, being detached enough to accept change. Why mourn the inevitable? What is inevitable? Death, old age, change of any sort. I'm speaking to you right now in the early part of June 2020. And, wherever you are in the world, we are living in very, very interesting times. It almost seems like just yesterday, but it's been a while since we have been caught in this reality of a global pandemic. It started in mid-March, I remember. I think March 13th or 14th is when the area where I live, it went into what we call shelter in place. I think it's a much better word than lockdown and quarantine and all of those other ways of referring to the same reality in essence. But, in those initial days, and still, I find myself, and a lot of us find ourselves caught in this change that we don't prefer. One of my friends was telling me how every time she passes through Palo Alto or, drives through this area, she has a favorite bakery. And it crosses her mind, oh, I should stop there to get a treat. And then she realizes, oh, I cannot do that. I cannot do that anymore. Either the bakery is not open or I'm being clean, I'm being isolated, that I don't want to mix with others, or whatever it is. So she catches herself thinking that she wants to do that, and then realizing that she cannot because it's just not the norm. Things have changed, things have moved on. That's a very silly example, but that in a sense is indicative of all that we face as challenge when we attach ourselves. And then change becomes difficult. Change becomes something we resist. Stress by definition occurs only because we resist something. And that's exactly what Krishna is counseling Arjuna against. Why mourn the inevitable? Why worry about something that you cannot change? Why not just flow? Why not just try to see what is happening and go with the flow, do what is right? That is the teaching presented to us here. And this world is tricky, and change is very, very difficult oftentimes. I find myself wondering so many times. Sometimes it's just frustrating. Why can't I just go to the store when I want to go? Why can't I just go for a hike? Why can't I just go talk to my friends? Can I just go to the restaurant and have a good dinner for once? It's just been 3 months. It feels like a lifetime of suffering, because that's really the nature of delusion also. Sadness and sorrow and depression and all of those things feel eternal when we are in it. But the only true constant is joy. All other things come to an end. All other things mutate. They change. And we have to notice this impulse in ourselves. We're being given a lot of opportunities at this time. I was just talking to a friend of mine just a while ago about how even something as simple as a haircut is so difficult right now in the times we are living in. You can't just get one when you want. And our mind, our ego resists. I want what I want when I want it. I'm used to having it. We create these patterns of habit. We attach ourselves to those impermanent patterns of the world. And then we find that resistance hard to work with. And Krishna is counseling Arjuna, just pull back. Use your discrimination. Look at this world. Even if you don't believe that there is a soul, even if you don't believe that there is immutable divinity residing within you that is not going to be affected by what's happening, irrespective of all that, still, you are seeing everything change. You are watching in front of your own eyes that nothing stays as is. Why then are you resisting what life is presenting in front of you? In the commentary on this verse, Swami Kriyananda says something which I've heard him say in other talks and writings before, but it was rather interesting for me to think about. He talks about when you take a shower in the morning, just to look at your own arms and just tell yourself, one day this is going to just be rotting flesh or just a bowl of ashes. Now, for some, that might just sound morbid. That might sound a little dark. But in essence, it is the truth. And sometimes it's easier to do in situations when we are not under pressure, when we are not actually facing that reality of death, either in our own lives or in the lives of those that are close to us. If we can tell ourselves every day, look at this body. It's after all impermanent. This is not who I am. This is just a garment I'm wearing. That's really what Krishna again says in one of the verses right before this one. This is a garment that you're wearing. Just like you take off a shirt and wear another one, you're just moving from one body into the other. I want to end this commentary for today by sharing something, this beautiful exercise that Swami mentions both in reference to this particular verse, but he spoke about it so often that all of us who practice these teachings and try to live this path of self-realization, we have this habit of doing this almost every day. I certainly do. And I like to make this, this is one of the highlights I can say of my entire day. Every day before going to bed, Swami Kriyananda counsels us to do this exercise. Lie down when you're done meditating, when you're done with everything that you have to do for the day. Right at that point, when you're drifting into your subconscious, when you're moving away from this world and going into that state of relaxation and sleep, he says, build a mental bonfire. Build this huge mental bonfire and go through everything in your day. Everything that happened as per your expectations, everything that did not happen as per your expectations, every interaction, every person you met, everything you enjoyed, everything that you did not enjoy, throw all of it into that bonfire and go beyond that day. Everything in your life, your relationships, your friends, your things that you own, your talents, your feelings, take all of it and throw it into the bonfire. Feel the joy, feel the ecstasy of letting go of all of it. See that bonfire as God's purifying light where you can offer all that limited identity, because it is a little difficult for us in the abstract to keep affirming that I am this immutable soul. But when we do let go, when we let go of everything that is not who I am, what is left is perfect bliss. So I would highly recommend that you try this exercise. I've been doing it for years now, and as I said, it is one of the best parts of my day. It is so relaxing. No matter what worries, anxieties, what situations we face in our life, right at that moment of drifting into sleep, when we are able to let go all of that, at least in that moment during the day when we are able to say, Lord, I'm going to step back from all of this. I'm giving everything unto you. I'm surrendering unto you all these things that I hold on to as my own. What a blessing. What a joy. What a release to be able to feel that. And one day, when we do this constantly every night, one day we will be able to live in that state of constant awareness where we do not even have to try. We just live in that consciousness of always giving everything up to God. So, in the next episode, we will talk more about the nature of right action and how Krishna counsels Arjuna on leading this life of detachment. Until then, God bless you all.